I'm Nancy, a 39-year-old working mom, married to Kevin, my college sweetheart. We tied the knot when I was 24, and our son, Samuel, is now 9. I thought we'd have the perfect marriage, but life has a way of keeping things far from predictable. Kevin casually mentioned that we'd be attending another New Year's gathering at my parents' house next year, and that he'd need my help with some of the planning. I paused for a moment, flipping through old photos, and felt my eyes linger on him. His words echoed in my mind, and my mood shifted in an instant. What he saw as a simple event felt like a heavy weight on my shoulders. For me, that gathering is a reminder of just how difficult things can get with his family, especially when it comes to my mother-in-law. The annual New Year's gathering at my in-laws' house is, without a doubt, the most draining event of the year. Dealing with my mother-in-law's constant jabs and unsolicited visits is exhausting, but the New Year's celebration takes it to a whole new level, while Kevin remains oblivious. For me, it's like an emotional minefield. One year, it reached a breaking point when she criticized the meal I had prepared. "Is this what you feed my son every day? It looks awful," she said, barely hiding her disdain. I kept my composure and suggested she simply not eat if she didn't like it. But she didn't stop there. To my dismay, when other relatives arrived, she proudly served the very same dishes she had just ridiculed. I fought to keep a smile, all while biting back my frustration. Kevin? He was too busy sulking to notice, leaving me to handle the barrage of complaints and endless tasks. By the time the night ended, I felt like a broken record, stuck in the same exhausting loop of demands. I had nearly forgotten about the upcoming New Year's gathering when my phone rang, jolting me back to reality. The caller ID made my stomach turn. It was my mother-in-law. I immediately flipped my phone face down, hoping the ringing would stop. And for a moment, it did. But then the landline rang, cutting through my brief moment of peace. With a sigh, I answered. "Hello? Why are you so slow to pick up?" she snapped. I tried to explain that I was busy, but it didn't matter. She was already announcing that I needed to come early to help with preparations. I didn't mind pitching in, but I couldn't help but wonder why Kevin never seemed to be expected to do the same. When I raised the question, she brushed me off, defending him with an excuse about his work schedule, as though that somehow exempted him from helping out around the house or with Samuel. Reluctantly, I found myself heading to my in-laws' house the next morning, dreading the long list of chores that awaited. True to form, it was an endless cycle of cleaning, shopping, laundry, and yard work. My father-in-law hardly even acknowledged me, a silent bystander to the chaos. Once the chores were done, the real fun began. Cooking. Despite feeling drained, I pushed myself to finish the meal. But of course, my mother-in-law found something to criticize. As always, her comments stung, and I could barely keep up the facade of politeness. The tension bubbled over when relatives finally arrived, leaving me with barely a moment to eat, let alone breathe. It was the same story every year: overworked, underappreciated, and emotionally drained. By the end of it all, I felt like a walking zombie, drained of energy and devoid of any positive memories from these New Year's gatherings. The annual celebration had become a grueling tradition, with my only comfort being the thought that I had to endure it just once a year. Watching Kevin's carefree humming in stark contrast to my exhaustion only deepened my sighs, as I pondered how unbearable this one day always seemed. Finally, the day of the New Year's gathering arrived. Cheerful cries of "Happy New Year" filled the air as Kevin and Samuel enthusiastically greeted the arriving guests. Yet, despite the festive atmosphere, I quickly realized my role remained the same: ignored and overburdened. My mother-in-law approached, handing me a note with a detached expression, her words barely acknowledging my presence. I glanced at the note, already 3 days into the new year, and felt a wave of disbelief. 12 kilograms of detergent. They're having a New Year's sale, so it's cheap. and a minimum of 56 cans of beer our family loves to drink. I blinked, stunned by the sheer audacity of her demand. Before I could muster a response, she disappeared into the house, leaving me to process the absurdity of running an errand in the middle of the celebration. To make matters worse, a quick check confirmed that, yes, the supermarket was open. I looked toward Kevin for support, only to find him already indulging in drinks. Oblivious to my silent plea, left with no other choice, I grabbed my coat and headed out into the cold. Returning with heavy bags in hand, I stepped into a house filled with laughter and cheer. For a fleeting moment, the sight of Samuel running to greet me with a wide smile brought a bit of warmth to my otherwise heavy heart. But as I set down the groceries and prepared to finally sit down, my eyes fell on the dining table. A lavish sushi platter sat at the center, overflowing with premium selections: tuna, shrimp, salmon, all beautifully arranged. Then it hit me, there was no platter for me. The realization stung, but it was overshadowed by the lively chatter around me. The room buzzed with joy, everyone immersed in their conversations, as though I were invisible. And by the end of it all, I felt like a walking zombie, drained of energy and devoid of any positive memories from these New Year's gatherings. The annual celebration had become a grueling tradition, with my only comfort being the thought that I had to endure it just once a year. Watching Kevin's carefree humming in stark contrast to my exhaustion only deepened my sighs, as I pondered how unbearable this one day always seemed. Finally, the day of the New Year's gathering arrived. Cheerful cries of Happy New Year filled the air as Kevin and Samuel enthusiastically greeted the arriving guests. Yet, despite the festive atmosphere, I quickly realized my role remained the same: ignored and overburdened. My mother-in-law approached, handing me a note with a detached expression, her words barely acknowledging my presence. I glanced at the note, already 3 days into the new year, and felt a wave of disbelief. 12 kilograms of detergent. They're having a New Year's sale, so it's cheap, and a minimum of 56 cans of beer our family loves to drink. I blinked, stunned by the sheer audacity of her demand. Before I could muster a response, she disappeared into the house, leaving me to process the absurdity of running an errand in the middle of the celebration. To make matters worse, a quick check confirmed that, yes, the supermarket was open. I looked toward Kevin for support, only to find him already indulging in drinks. Oblivious to my silent plea, left with no other choice, I grabbed my coat and headed out into the cold. Returning with heavy bags in hand, I stepped into a house filled with laughter and cheer. For a fleeting moment, the sight of Samuel running to greet me with a wide smile brought a bit of warmth to my otherwise heavy heart. But as I set down the groceries and prepared to finally sit down, my eyes fell on the dining table. A lavish sushi platter sat at the center, overflowing with premium selections: tuna, shrimp, salmon, all beautifully arranged. Then it hit me, there was no platter for me. The realization stung, but it was overshadowed by the lively chatter around me. The room buzzed with joy, everyone immersed in their conversations, as though I were invisible. And as I challenged the very idea of discriminating against my place in this family, making my mother-in-law fall unnervingly silent. The quiet stretches on until Kevin finally speaks up, his voice dripping with sympathy for his mother's struggles hosting the New Year's party. As my wife, it's your responsibility to apologize to Mom, he says, as if it's some unwritten rule. I don't let him finish. Hold on a second. I cut in. This is your home, Kevin. I've been helping because it's your family. But where have you been? You're the son here, not me. You don't even know that your wife was out hauling heavy bags across town. What's going on? If you had told me. I don't pause. My voice grows stronger. You just waltz in, sit down, start eating and drinking like you own the place. And then, when you see your wife getting disrespected, you just sit there, acting like it's fine. What's so lucky about this, Kevin? What's so lucky about being treated like dirt? Don't even think about messing with me right now. I can see him shrink under my words, his confidence slipping away, as he cowers before my glare. That's when my mother-in-law steps in, ready to strike. You are so arrogant for a daughter-in-law. What do you think you're doing, speaking to me like this? We don't need a woman like you in this family. Divorce. Right now. Kevin says nothing, the words stuck in his throat. His mother doesn't let up, her voice getting harsher by the second. A wife's place is to listen to her in-laws, to obey her husband. You should have known better. Next time, marry a woman who knows her place. The finality of her words cuts deep, but something inside me snaps. My eyes flash with challenge, and I lean forward, daring her to push me further. Oh, so you're saying, mother-in-law, that you're a submissive wife? Who never goes against father-in-law? I ask, as I pull a carefully stored photo from my bag, making sure it gets the grand entrance it deserves, complete with the imagined sound of triumphant trumpet music. I toss the photos across the floor, watching them scatter dramatically. So, obedient mother-in-law, what's this? Gasps fill the room as the photos hit the ground. Eyes widen as people take in the shocking images. What is this? Someone demands. Who is this man she's holding hands with? Wait, they're going into a hotel. The pictures speak volumes, one after another. They show my mother-in-law with a man I don't recognize. In each shot, they're holding hands, looking intimate, and some are so explicit that I make sure Samuel can't see. I had always wondered about her strange, frequent visits, so much so that I started keeping track. It seemed odd to me that she'd come by just to make snide comments, never really explaining herself. She'd show up dressed up, sometimes looking like she had a purpose, but never giving a clear reason. That's when I began to suspect something. What was she doing while leaving father-in-law alone? After some time off work, I hired a private investigator to look into her actions. These photos were the result. Mom, what is this? Kevin stammers, his face pale, eyes wide with disbelief. It's not what it looks like, mother-in-law pleads, her voice shaky, trying and failing to calm the storm she's just caused. The images don't lie, and no amount of denial can cover them up. In her panic, she turns to father-in-law, seeking some form of salvation. You believe me, don't you? This isn't what it seems, she says, her voice desperate. But father-in-law, who's always been a quiet presence, now glares at her with something much darker in his eyes, anger. Something I've never seen from him. It's chilling, as she stumbles over her words, trying to salvage her crumbling story. Father-in-law gives her a sharp, dismissive brush off. He doesn't even acknowledge her hand reaching out for reassurance. Instead, he turns to me with a look of genuine remorse. I'm sorry, really. I thought you were okay handling everything. Even if that were true, I was wrong to let you carry all this on your own. I apologize for that. His apology is a shock to me, but it's not just his. The relatives, who have been quiet until now, begin to murmur their own apologies. It's as if the entire room is suddenly waking up to the truth. Could you share those photos with me? Father-in-law asks after a long pause. Of course, I reply, my tone calm but resolute. I have all the data, so I can provide as many as you need. He nods, his expression softening just slightly. He collects the photos from the floor and heads out of the room. His footsteps echo in the silence as mother-in-law follows him, her voice growing faint, still pleading for someone to believe her. The room is left in a strange stillness, but it doesn't last long. The relatives start moving, working together without a word. The dishes are cleaned, leftovers packed, tables wiped down, chores that I've always done alone are now shared. It's efficient, effortless even. and there's something unexpectedly fulfilling about it. Later that day, after the gathering, where I had finally asserted myself, I get a call from father-in-law. He tells me that the divorce is finalized. He's kicked mother-in-law out of the house, and she's taken refuge with her affair partner. But when she demanded alimony, he abandoned her. Now shunned by everyone, she has nowhere to go but to her strict brother's house, where she's living under his watchful, controlling eye. Currently, I'm living apart from Kevin, a man who has given nothing, offered no support, and never once stood up for me. The separation doesn't bother me in the slightest. I had rented this apartment before we got married, and I've always been the one paying the rent. It only seemed natural that Kevin would leave. While he believes a fresh start is possible, I know it's too late. His past financial reliance on me has left him in a cheap apartment, constantly asking for my help, which I refuse to provide. I remain indifferent to his pleas. Meanwhile, Samuel doesn't seem affected by his father's absence, which speaks volumes about Kevin's role in our home and in his son's life. As Samuel talks about school with a bright smile, I realize that the answer is clear. I am moving forward, starting a new chapter, and it's one that doesn't include Kevin. I'm ready to move on, alongside Samuel, into a life where we can finally thrive.